All right, we're close. It's almost live at 11:05. It's probably more like live at 11:07 or so. And today, I think we'll talk about painting. And there's a lot to painting before it gets to this area, and a lot after. And we got a compressor going in the background, so hopefully you don't hear that too much. So we didn't turn it off. But we should get good sound. I've got an echo chamber, so I'm in a spray booth. This is our spray booth, and then to the side of it there's a spray room, and this is actually a spray bake, so you can put heat in it, but we're not in such a production situation where we got to bake it to get it done quick. We just need to get it done right. And dust is always an issue, so you want a clean environment before we go to paint anything. We're going to wash everything down, sweep it down, get it going good. So, where to start? I don't know if you're not, hopefully you're not annoyed by the compressor in the background. I am, but where to start in paint? We talked about it's not what you see, but it's what you don't see. That the base is really what's really important. It's behind, underneath the paint here. First off, we'll start with well, here, where do we start? Before we get too started, don't fret. You can do this. It's not that hard. With today's modern materials, it's pretty good. But this is what we get to deal with. MSDS sheets. These are material safety data sheets. You can see it, but it's a lot of information that even the people that need to have these probably don't know what it means, but it tells you there's aluminum phosphate, there's titanium dioxide, there's barium sulfite, there's calcium carbonate, just in this one product. So every product that a company like us uses, we have got to have a material safety data sheet, just so we can be EPA compliant, of course. So we got all that. And then what else you get here? You got this is the technology that you use. This is another EPA thing. This is the kind of filters we use. We need to keep track of our exchanges of what we do with our waste. What materials did you use? How many VOCs did you put in the air? When they say VOC, usually when you go to buy food and you think organic, I love organic, we're going to buy organic. Well, when you get to the EPA in this world, we have volatile organic compounds, VOCs. So you got to be aware that the VOC that goes in the air and this and that. I don't know what else we got here. Well, we got water quality regulations, so we got to make sure everything that gets potentially into the ecology. So you got Arkansas Pollution Control and those regulations. And we got another book of, well, this is the Code of Federal Regulations for who knows what, but when you hear, especially one of our current politicians talk about regulations stifling business, well, I'm all for being compliant and you know, being safe, and that's absolutely important. If at all possible, we buy materials from one supplier we have for years. The R&E Paint Supply, they're online. I don't think they can sell paint online, but they sell all kinds of products, and they're very knowledgeable people, and it's very helpful to have a paint store that you can go to and ask questions about the product that you're using. We've had several customers in the past send us the paint, and for years I wouldn't, if somebody wanted me to paint the car with the paint they supplied, we would just, bottom line, if it came down to it, refuse the job. Because it's hard to guarantee a product that you're not familiar with and you don't know very much about. But anyway, a couple times during the last year or so, we painted some cars that the customer supplied the paint and the clear. Paint and clear is pretty expensive. And Well, when I just said that, we just now had a customer supply the paint, but he talked to us first about what paint he was going to get, the company was getting it, went over the products, and I think he spent, what did he spend for his, just his paint and his clear? $2,500 or something?
Yeah.
So we've had other people send paint they got online, a couple $100 they spent for all the clear and the paint and everything. The color was pretty cool, but the quality of the product, it just never got hard the way it should. It just was a poor quality product. So anyway, at Spear Cars, we use PPG. We're just a PPG shop. We're familiar with their products. They stand behind it. They warranty their products, and they've been around a long time. Pittsburgh Paint Company. Pittsburgh. Was it Pittsburgh Paint Group? I think it's PPG what it stands for. But anyway, if at all you can get, I've been in the classes for years, but I still kind of get the gist of what goes on with painting. But this is just a book of, you've heard me talk before about time, temperature, and thickness. The temperature has a lot to do with how fast something's going to dry. The thickness of it has a lot to do with how fast it's going to dry. I mean, they basically, if they give you a number in your book here, they're going off of 75 degrees Fahrenheit at 50% relative humidity. So if you've got more humidity, it's going to change the way it acts. If you got less, and you have a pot life. Right now we use a lot of polyurethanes, which have a pot life. And here's just like a note on here. Note to remember, thin paint dries faster than thick paint. Two-component cross-linking slows significantly below 55, and you may have heard me say that too. It needs heat to activate, and it creates its own heat once it starts going. So this is just a book of technical information, all the way down to proper labeling of your things and the DOT requirements, but VOCs and actually infrared paint curing, and I mean just over and over. If you have the opportunity and you want to be a painter, and I would highly recommend, if your paint store offers, this is a course, I went to a course at some point in history, and it was probably a pretty extensive 3-day course, and this is the book materials that I got. And to get a certification from PPG as a gold shop, it's not just taking that course. You can take the course and know a lot about painting, but they don't give you any certifications unless you've got several years in the trade, which is, you know, being in the trades. I believe in apprenticeships. I believe in a journeyman. And I believe there is such a thing as a master. I'm a firm believer in the trades and the process that goes through learning a trade. This is the most important book here of all that other stuff. Okay. If your paint supplier can and will give you a P sheet, it's a product sheet, a P sheet we call them. And I can look under the P sheets, and what I'm looking for here, and I found it pretty quick, amazingly, a primer surfacer. Now this is the different primer surfacers that PPG would offer, the K200s and the K36s and the DP35s, and we use, they all do kind of the same thing, only a little different. So you kind of get what your favorites are, or ask around. Some people like it better. And some of it uses the same activator for this is a primer sealer. So you got a primer surfacer, then you got a primer sealer, and you also have a sealer. So since we're not going to paint this today, I'm just going to take you from what's under here to what we see right here. And we actually have a process for that. There's a time for this 27, I don't know what pays, we call it paint prep, probably pays 20 hours for paint prep. Is that right?
No, 18 hours.
Okay, so a car at the 27, if you would get a 27 from us, just like we got a 27 out of the body shop, send it into the paint shop, we estimate about 18 hours for paint prep. And what that does is get to this place right here. It's got primer on it. And it's got an activated urethane primer. The big difference between, and technology has come a long way. We had some steps in between where Even the paint companies were guessing on what they were doing, and EPA forced some things on them that they had to make changes, and it wasn't an improvement to the product, it was just an improvement for that VOC issue. But I had it explained to me this way one time, and it made a lot of sense. A lacquer primer is a non-activated material, would be like a hard dirt road. I mean, you can drive on it, and it's hard, and it's like a rock. But when you wet it, when a good rainstorm comes, it gets turned into mud again. You can take a 100-year-old nitrocellulose lacquer, that's old though, but just an old lacquer, and you could take a lacquer thinner, and wipe it. You can soften that paint and get it off. Where if you take a modern urethane paint or a polyurethane, it's like a concrete. Once it's activated, it cross-links, and you have, thumbing through this, I've seen some pictures, if I can find it real quick. Anyway, if you can picture my pictures in here, it just cross-links. It locks together, and you can take it, wipe it with thinner. You may be able to dull the finish a little bit or something like that, but it's not going to eat into the finish. It's not going to chemically break it down. There are some, paint strippers and stuff like that can break into it, but generally it's like a plastic. Some plastics, if you get the right kind of a thinner will eat into it, but generally it will not. So that's the differences. We always use a two-part component, starting with our primers. Through our sealer, we'll seal this. Through our paint, it's not a two-part component, the actual color itself, but then the clear that goes on top of it for the UV value and everything else is a two-part component, and it bonds that in between there. So we start with our body. If you get a body from Spirit Cars, it's going to have probably a seam right through here. Since there's reverse curves, we've got it on bolt and mold around it, so there'll be a seam that's going down through here. So it'll take a little bit of body work. And a couple of the tools, this is a tool if you're going to be a painter. A DA is just like a tool you use all the time. You can do 40 grit. 40 grit is very aggressive, but then finish to 80 grit. So I've got a Velcro pad on here, because these discs are pretty expensive. You probably know better than I do, Josh, but I bet a 40 grit is probably, what, 50 cents a piece maybe? Somewhere in that
I don't
neighborhood.
remember.
Yeah, getting down to these are probably 20-25 cents. So, when I got a guy doing this, and it's almost sort of wore, and he's like, oh, I'm done with that one. I want to go to 120 or 220 now. At least you can change it. I could have saved that other one and use it again later. So I'm down to 80. I want to get to at least 180. 120 is acceptable, but 180 is where we finish to before I put primer on it. And a primer surfacer, now you heard me read a little bit about a primer sealer and a primer surfacer. With a primer surfacer, say a 200K, you're going to fill those 180 scratches. Depending on your skill level, you can make things pretty straight, even though it's a round pad, and they call it a DA because it's dual action. It both spins, but it vibrates at the same time. So you can sand around, you can make these curves pretty good, but there's nothing like the little sanding block. So this is just a stick of paper. I've got 150, so this has probably been blocked. After the initial, say 180 over everything, with the DA, we primered it with a primer surfacer, activated primer surfacer. Then we would take a 150 in areas that we might have done some body work. And we also use, this is another pad with 150 on it. This is more of a foam soft pad. This is a harder pad. So if you're doing a big area where it's real flat, you want it flat, you can use that pad. You can also do by hand. I mean, you gotta be careful. It's all about technique too, especially if you're gonna get in a corner here. I'm gonna wanna, this is gonna be a little area that's kind of tough. I'm gonna wanna sand it. I mean, you're almost sculpting the shape. And it doesn't matter if you're working with 40 or you're working with 2000 grit. You're still sculpting every bit of the way. It's just that 2000 grit is not taking as much off, so you're getting it a little more fine-tuned. So we've come all the way to here. I've got this primered once in the worst areas. So if we had Bondo here maybe, we had some here, we had wherever. Did that all. Then I blocked it with this block, or maybe I even just DA'd it, or I went over with by hand. But I got it a little better. I can feel I'm straight now. I'm looking good. I like my lines. Everything's good. I primed the whole car now. So this is really the second coat of primer. I put a little bit of primer on my areas that had some body work, and I did a whole other coat on the whole thing. So now from this point, I'm going to start with, I can go with the 320, or I can go with the 600, but I may start with the 320, and this is wet dry paper. And you can go with, on my DA, I've got 220 here, and it's just labeled on the back of the paper. You can see it says 220, and I brought a sheet of 320 also. You could probably finish with 320 on the DA, depending on the color you're using. That would be acceptable, and depending on the quality of the paint job. I'm not going to say it's bad, but the nicer the finish, the better the quality of the paint job, because it will have a tendency to shrink a little bit. Not massively, but a 40 grit scratch is going to shrink a whole lot more than a 2000 grit scratch, so I'll assure you that. So if I go to 320, I have a little, it's like a foam block here. I'll wrap my paper on there. I've got some water, and I can start blocking. I did a video, I don't know, several weeks back on wet sanding before we went ahead and buffed. And when I did that, I was using 1500 and 2000 grit. Right now I started with 600 grit. And you can either get a rubber squeegee, or I've got a Bondo spreader that's pretty new. I can pull it across there. And I doubt you're going to be able to see it, but I can still see some of the flaws in the paint here. There's a little bit of, I don't know if that's a pinhole or a fisheye or this or that. So once I get all that out, I'm going to go to 600. The sheets come 8.5 by 11. I always take a sheet, cut it in half. A lot of the pads are made for the 8.5 by 11. You fold it around the pad, or if I'm going to sand by hand, I'll just fold it like this. Then I can sand it with this one, open it up, sand it like that. So I'm with 600 now. So once I get the entire car sanded to 600, I'm going to keep looking at it. I'm not going to work a big area. I'm not going to do, sand here and sand here and sand here and then go back and say, okay, I got to sand it. I'm going to work a small area until I get this area right. So I'm going to know I got this area right here, then I may go into here, get it around the dash, and work in sections until I get all the way around it. And at that point, I've got it to 600. I like to put a sealer on. You don't have to put a sealer on if you use a primer sealer. If you've got it to 600, you're good to go. So a lot of times you'll cut through. On this, even after the second coat, it still had a little issue here. We cut through, you can see the gel coat. That's not bad. I mean, it would be, you could sand it out and you could paint over that. But what's going to happen, a lot of the paints are transparent. And it's going to take more paint to cover this than it will this. So you'll have that white spot going through, and 2 to 3 coats, depending on the color, is going to be close to getting your color covered. But nowadays there's we use a lot of 2-stage, most everything, even if a solid color, I'll put a 2-stage down so we'll have a solid color and then go clear on top of that. It looks a little deeper. But you may have a tri-coat where your base color is going to be, say you've got a blue base color, and then you've got more of a pearl transparent color that goes on top. If you got that, you absolutely need to be careful. You're not seeing light spots like this. You want your entire car to be the same color before you start. A lot of the paint will actually tell you what color base to put down. You can buy different color sealers, gray sealers, red sealers, white sealers. They have tintable sealers, so you could add a little bit of your paint color into the sealer. So your sealer is actually getting your first color down at least close, and you can see that. I'm not going to go too much into paint. I think we'll stop on the prep side here. Start with a fresh body. Don't be frustrated if it takes you a little while to get it done. We consider 18 hours just to have it ready to get the paint be ready to go to the painter, you could say. And from this point, it's another, how much to paint it? Another 20 hours. And putting the color on here is the least of the issue. I mean, I can whip around here and I can get this painted in probably an hour and a half. I'll have paint on it. You got drive times in between. But again, you got a whole other set of sanding and blocking. And the more time you spend blocking and getting it straight, the nicer your car is going to look when you're finished. I think we'll spend just a whole different time on spraying techniques, some of the spray equipment. Again, it may look like a lot of books, but if you can, and you're if the company you buy from will give you a P sheet for the product, this is concept color. It tells you what reducers to use, cool temperature, medium temperature. These are 4 different reducers that I can use in the same paint. It gives you a little background on the paint. It gives you some directions for use, some wash up. It tells you what hardeners it goes with it, reducers, formulas for, mixing this part, 2 parts of this, 1 part, 2 part. It tells you the maximum pot lives here, blending and spot repair, accelerators. So this here, all this information is a P sheet for one product, which would be a color. So this would be just a color. If your paint supplier will give you one of those, just ask for the P sheet with confidence. They may try to give you the MSDS sheet because they're required to give that to you by the EPA, which has no value for really anybody. And you'll get your MSDS sheet and it'll tell you what chemicals are in it, but even if you know what chemicals are, that does really little to help you paint your car. But if you ask your supplier, hey, can I have a P sheet for that product? Develop a relationship with them, and you can paint your car at home. Just because it's not 30 years ago, doesn't mean we got to be so over-tech that we can't get this stuff done in the garage. Pull the garage door down, put you a little box fan under the garage door and paint away. I mean, you can do it. I mean, that's what Spirit's about. We're helping you build your car, build your dream, and it doesn't have to be done in-house here. And we'd be glad to build you one if that's not what you want to do. If you just want a car and you have the ideas, that's fine too. But so today, I may run a little long, but that's getting your car prepped. We're going to go pass it on. Ernie, a friend of mine, the Hot Rod Man, wrote a little book. He wrote 2 books. Hobby Brake Contemplations. Again, I'd say they're not proverbs, but they're little sayings by Ernie. So I've been ending this show by reading one of those. Oh, Brandy, I want to give you a shout out. I was in Northwest Arkansas the other day, and she came up to me and she said she watches this show every day. She don't see it live, but she sees it at night. So, Brandy, if you're watching, hey, and that sword I got from you, I was sword fighting with my grandkids. They had some foam swords. When I got home, I had that wicked sword. I just showed up, and boy, they loved it. So, anyway, Halloween's coming up. So, according to Ernie, when a thing goes up in value, the increase is referred to as appreciation. The more we appreciate all that we have, the wealthier we become. Good job, Hot Rod Man. I like that one. So for today, We're talking about how to get it ready. Maybe this week we'll talk about what happens when you put the paint on.